Hey friends, welcome back to Belle's Library. Today I am filming a March wrap-up video, so I'm going to talk about everything that I read in March. I'm also going to talk about what I did for Historathon Quarter 1 as well as for March of the Mammoths. So this is kind of like my March/Quarter 1 mega wrap-up video. So first I will start with, I'm going to start with the stuff you guys haven't seen yet. So I will start with my DNFs. All right, so in March I had 3 DNFs that I remember. I haven't been keeping good track of my DNFs, but I've started about like halfway through March keeping track of them. So the first one that I DNF'd was this one. So this is In Search of Ogopogo by Arlene Gall. This is basically just a book that this woman wrote, I think self-published possibly. Maybe not. Anyway, about the Ogopogo sea creature in Canada. Sorry about the glare there. And this is on Lake Okanagan up in BC. So this is basically one of those popular lake monster, stories, legends, whatever, that people wonder about. Are these things true? Are they not? Whatever. And it's interesting. And I was interested in reading this. It actually had been in my paperback swap wish list for like a really long time, maybe like 20 years. And so it finally came up and I requested it and all that. But after I got reading it a little bit, I was like, all of this information can be found online, which I know is horrible to do to an author, especially a self-published author. I don't really want to take the time to read what I can just get on YouTube and watch in 20 minutes. So I decided to go ahead and DNF that one and move on to something else. What I moved on to was another DNF. I was in between books and I was just kind of like, when you just finished something that was maybe just kind of big and which is exactly what I was going through, and you just wanted something that was completely different from what you just read, right? And so I was kind of choosing some thinner volumes off of my TBR shelves. And so the next thing I chose was The Case of the Missing Bronte by Robert Bernard. So I actually came across this book quite a while ago. And at the time I was like, I don't really want to read that, but I thought I might want to read it at some point. And so I sent it to my mom and thought, well, she can hold on to it for a while. Maybe she can read it and then she can sort of like vet this book for me. So her response was that it was boring and she didn't finish it either, I don't think. And so sent it back and I did give it a try, but yeah, I was bored. So I DNF'd that one pretty quickly also. The third DNF for March was something that I picked up right at the end of the month because I wanted to start my Historathon Quarter 2 a little early. And so I picked up Mysteries of the Middle Ages by Thomas Cahill. I knew better, but I thought I would give him another try. So I read his book on how the Jews saved the world or America or something. Something about the Jews, and I read that a while back, and there's so much in there I didn't agree with, and just my views on history were different than his, and I just didn't like his tone. I thought he was kind of sarcastic and kind of arrogant, and I just really didn't like the book, and I didn't like him, and I didn't like the way it was written. Like there's a lot I did not like, and so I didn't pick anything else up by him. But this one really caught my eye because it has like a lot of pretty illustrations in it, and like the paper is really nice. I know, really good quality paper, and it just, I don't know, it just really kind of struck my attention, and it's about the Middle Ages, which I thought I might enjoy a little bit more. But I just couldn't get past him. The information was great, but I just don't like him. He's not nice. I think he's really sarcastic, and I don't, and while I'm a sarcastic person, his is mean sarcasm, right? Especially towards Christians, and, Christians have a history of a lot of yuck. I totally get that, especially in the Middle Ages, not defending them at all. But he would be very sarcastic in the way he would talk about, the atrocities that the Christians committed, but he didn't mention any atrocities that, the non-Christians committed. There's a lot of, yucky stuff that was involved in pagan worship and other things too over the years that has been gross also. So, I mean, if we're going to call out one religious group, let's call them all out, right? And just in the context of which he was calling them out, like it could have been fine. He didn't call out the Romans for any of their grossness or the way that they treated Christians. Like, it just, you know, he was just biased, and it bugged me. And it bugged me in a nonfiction that he was biased. So that's okay. I mean, people do that. It's fine. I just don't like him. Also, the book had like some footnotes that were just kind of weird because they were long and they were like off to the side. And so it's like you're reading along and you're like, okay, at what point, at what paragraph am I going to like stop reading to come over here and read the side, right? And so it just was like that on so many pages that it was very distracting to me. I couldn't just get into it because I'm constantly reading all of these weird side notes where you could have just put that information in the paragraph. That's what I don't get. It wasn't like a short little explanation. It was like a whole thing. So I don't know. He used like the word like UGH, like you know, and I just thought that was so odd in the dialogue of his story here. So yeah, I didn't prefer that at all. All right, so those were the DNFs that I remember DNFing. And then now I'm going to go on to the books that I read. Okay, so the first one that I read, and the first one I finished for March, was Pride and Prejudice. I've read Pride and Prejudice dorky zillions of times, like so many zillions of times, but I went ahead and finished it. And the reason why there's only like little tabs at the very end of it was this is the first time I read while I was using tabs, but also I only read like the last couple of chapters, maybe the last, I don't know, maybe 60 pages or so. It was a few chapters, because I had been reading this on my other channel, just like a little portion each. It was like a weekly video thing I was doing, and I was reading a portion each week. Well, I decided to discontinue that whole thing, and so I had left off at almost the end, and I was like, well, you know, need to finish the book. I can't just leave off. So I went ahead and finished it. So Pride and Prejudice, I didn't necessarily read the whole thing in March, but I did finish it in March. So I'm counting it. And again, you know, I think this was my 7th read through, and it's a wonderful story. And it kind of got me in the mood, right, for England, because Seela and I are leaving here in 10 days, 12 days, 11 days. I think we're leaving in 11 days to go to England, and we're going to do Bath and Winchester and London and all the Jane spots that are in those areas. And so that will be really fun for her and to introduce her to all these new places, right? And so just kind of getting in the mood for England and for Bath especially. I really love Mr. Bennet. His humor just cracks me up, right? He's so just like, whatever, guys. Like, I'm stuck in a house full of women, do whatever. I'm going to go read my book in my study. Leave me alone. So I love that about Mr. Bennet. And I even liked Mrs. Bennet. I liked voicing her character when I was reading this out loud. I was extremely obnoxious, and that was super fun. Something I focused on previous readings of Pride and Prejudice is how Lizzie and Darcy just give each other such mixed signals, right? There's this one episode at dinner, and I'll read it off to you. This exchange really struck me because they were working things out towards the end of the story, right? And Lizzie asks why he looked like he didn't care about her the last time he came to call. And he said it was because she didn't seem like she wanted his attentions. And she said, well, it was because she was embarrassed at her previous behavior. And he said that he was embarrassed of his own as well. And she says, you might have talked to me more when you came to dinner. And he says, a man who had felt less might. Ah, I love that. That's such a sweet thing about it. But isn't that the way it is, right? When we're communicating in a relationship, we're trying to sort of second guess the other person. How many loves have been lost just to poor communication? It's kind of it's a sad thought, right? So we really got to humble ourselves, right? And be vulnerable if we want our Jane Austen-esque romances to last for a lifetime. All right, so Pride and Prejudice, that one is done again. And I don't know when I will read Pride and Prejudice again. I've read that one the most, I think, of all of her books. And then I probably read Northanger Abbey and Sense and Sensibility 3 or 4 times each. But Mansfield Park and Persuasion and Emma, I have only read once each. So I probably should reread those before I go back to Pride and Prejudice again. All right, the next book that I finished was the gigantic Mammoth. This was my choice for March of the Mammoths. I read London, the Biography by Peter Ackroyd. And this was a feat of great doing because I'll tell you, yeah, this book was about 760 pages without the like end notes. And so I counted it because my friend told me that there were other shorter versions that were well over 1,000. This one's kind of tall, right? So I was like, all right, I'll count it. But So in 760 pages, by about page 60, I realized, you know, I've read a lot about London in my life, and I was already feeling oversaturated, and I had 700 pages to go. And so I really thought about DNFing it, and I was like, no, I really want to read this. I like Peter Ackroyd. I love learning about London, and I'm going soon, so I want it kind of in my mind, and maybe I'll discover some places that, you know, I want to see when I'm there. And I went ahead and I went through this book, but I went through it. It was such a struggle. And that is really not to say that it's the book's fault so much. I think for me, I was just oversaturated with information about London. Like, I know a lot. I've read a lot. Not nearly enough to, you know, like anyone who has actually lived there or anything like that. But, you know, for an American, I think I've probably read a lot about London. And so most of the information in this book was stuff that I was already aware of. I had already read multiple times in other books. And so this is basically like an encyclopedia on London. On one hand, it seems like everything you could ever think of about London is in this book. But the thing that I really noticed was a very regular theme throughout the book is negativity. This guy really focused a lot on the negative aspects of London. Its dirtiness, its crime rate, all of the, you know, horrible, sinful yuck that goes on in London. And I know, I get it. There's a lot of that there, but there's a lot of beauty too. And there's a lot of amazing things. And, you know, we could focus on so many cool things like the architecture and like the, you know, just history, like the fun history of London, and just different people groups and the good that, you know, Londoners and England as a whole has done. And just all of the wonder that we are exposed to when we go there and visit. Like, I don't see London as this negative, dirty, crime-filled, just horrific, sin-ridden slum hole. And that's kind of how he makes it sound. And I mean, that kind of behavior is everywhere, right? Like, it's not it's so huge in London and not so bad in, you know, Chicago or Detroit or some of the American cities that have a yucky reputation. I can't see that, you know, maybe per capita because it's a really big city, but otherwise I just don't see how it is any worse than any other big city with a lot of diverse people living in it, a lot of diverse things going on in it. So I really did have that bone to pick with him because it was a consistent thing over and over again. Negative, negative, negative. That really bothered me. So I shared a few things from the book in my March of the Mammoths week 1 check-in, but I'll share a few more things here that I have marked. One thing I thought was interesting was a story about women who would fight, I guess, like, you know, for entertainment. And each woman would have to hold half a crown in their hands to keep a closed fist to keep them from scratching each other. So they would have to hold half a crown in each hand, both of them, so that they could only use fists and arms, but no fingernails. Thought that was funny. That's smart, right? I learned that there was 12 verses to London Bridge. That surprised me. Another thing that I thought was interesting was the bombings, I believe, of 1940 of London. Something that happened was air damage. So they were storing some very old seeds here at the Natural History Museum, and the bomb damage caused certain seeds there to be exposed to, you know, the damp, the air, or whatever, including mimosa brought from China in 1793. After their trance of 147 years, they began to grow again. That was pretty cool. And then it talked about just how so much of the area had just been bombed, you know, just torn up. So it was found that all of these birds and insects and wildflowers came to kind of back into their habitat, right? Because so much of this was bombed out that it sort of went back to the marshlands that it was before it started being built on. And it says in this one book, London's Natural History by R.S. Fitter, said that after the war, The profusion of wildflowers, birds, and insects to be seen on the bombed sites of the city is now one of the sights of London. He mentioned 269 wildflowers, grasses, and ferns, 3 mammals, 31 birds, 56 insects, and 27 kinds of other invertebrates had appeared since 1939 because of the upset to the land there. And these animals, birds, and insects, and flowers, plants, and things coming back to the land. So that was very interesting. So, you know, there was some good stuff in the book. I'm glad I read it. I will definitely keep it for a reference for sure. Whether I will read it through front to back again anytime soon, that will definitely not happen anytime soon. But in the future, who knows? But it's a great reference book. It was just a lot to read all at once when a lot of it was not new information. So I've learned my lesson. Next year's Mammoth is going to be something that will be maybe educational or on a subject that I'm not super familiar with. I've already decided. So I'm glad I did March of the Mammoths. I'm super glad that this is done though, for sure. All right, and then the third book that I finished in March was Elizabeth Gaskell's Gothic Tales. Hallelujah! I am done with the Gothic Tales. Oh my goodness. So I thought that I would enjoy, because it's Gothic Tales, and look at the cover. I mean, come on. But I did not enjoy most of these. I liked Lois the Witch. I thought that Lois the Witch really was probably the best story that I have read, a fictional story about the Salem witch trials and just, you know, people involved. It was there was a lot of compassion in that story, and just really great character development and character description of Lois. And I've read a lot about the Salem witch trials, both fiction and nonfiction, and I really did enjoy this imagining of that story. I thought it was well done. The other one that kept my attention was The Gray Woman. I thought that there was a lot of coincidence there and it was pretty far-fetched. And to be honest, I've already forgotten the basics of that story and had to consult my Goodreads to give you a comment because I knew that there was one other story in here that was fairly tolerable. So it was forgettable. But everything else in here, it was just kind of convoluted and not gothic-y, right? Not something that sort of is even mildly spine-tingling or even psychologically weird, or it just, I don't even know. Like, I do not know what this is. But I was not impressed. So I kind of gave myself a goal to find a way to like Elizabeth Gaskell. And so far, I really haven't liked anything that I've read by Elizabeth Gaskell other than maybe the biography of Charlotte Bronte. And I think that was just because that was the first thing that I'd ever read about the Brontes ever. And so it was all new information to me and was interesting. I don't know. So I'm just going to have to try something else because so many people say such great things about Elizabeth Gaskell, but I'm just not feeling it, guys. I'm not seeing the greatness here. So I will say this. One of the stories, Curious But True, or maybe it's Curious If True. Yeah, it's Curious If True. Something I picked up reading that was this. There is a lot of end notes in this book on that particular story. And when you're reading it, like, at least me, I did not get it from the very beginning. I was having such a difficult time following it. And usually I kind of ignore end notes. I feel like I just kind of want to figure this out as I go. You know, if I have to reread this story years from now, and then I understand it now because I have more information, you know, in the meantime that I've picked up about just life and history and whatever, I kind of would rather sort of do things that way and let stories, you know, develop and let myself sort of mature into them. And so I tend to ignore footnotes and endnotes and that kind of thing, unless I have a specific question. But for this story, I was just like, what is going on? I have no idea what is going on here. And it seemed like I should have, just the way it was written. I was like, this seems like it's alluding to things and that I should know that I don't know. But I found that after reading the endnotes that the struggles I was having was because I was not making the same connections with the story that her contemporaries would have made. I found that this story was actually full of references to 18th and 19th century children's literature, especially stories that I had never read, many of them British stories. So I don't have a lot of, you know, understanding of 18th and 19th century British children's literature other than the stuff that's made it this way, you know, like Alice in Wonderland or whatever. And so that was a big reason why I was struggling to get this, because I just hadn't gone there in my reading journey yet. So a lot of it was referencing fairy tales, and I know next to nothing about fairy tales or any childhood literature of that time, really. And so it caused me, right, to miss so much of the story. But it just goes to show that the more we read, the more we know, right? So down the road sometime, I might pick up that story and get it. I might understand it. I might even find it funny, which apparently it was supposed to be. I don't know. Because I will have been able to understand the references, right? But I do not think these are Gothic tales. I do not see the Gothic element here. And I don't know. I did not like these tales. But I'll keep it because, you know, it matches all my other Penguin classics. And I have faith that someday down the road I will like her better. And then maybe I can revisit this book of tales and actually enjoy them. Also, my husband got it for me as a gift, so it's hard for me to get rid of books that he gets for me. All right, and then the last thing that I just want to touch on for just a second, because I have made other videos about these. These are the two books that I read for Historathon. This is Mary Beard's Confronting the Classics and the Babylonians by Gwendolyn Leake. And I actually have a whole video on those, which I will link in the description box. But those are the two that I read for Historathon Quarter 1, which is prehistory up to 500 AD. And so I have extensive thoughts on those in those other videos. And then I'm actually counting London as like a half. So I'm going to say I read 2.5 for Historathon Quarter 1, because there was a lot of that in there, of that time period in there. And I guess I'm just kind of trying to console myself for having read the gigantic book. So that's another good reason why, right? Part of it was for Historathon Quarter 1. All right, guys, that is my March wrap up. Happy to be done. Happy to be in April. This month I am doing Katie Lumsden's April TBR Clearout Readathon. That's on Books and Things. I'll put her down in the description box too. And in that challenge, we basically are just trying to get rid of our TBR, right? So I think the idea is that we don't buy a whole lot more and read those books, and that we aren't like visiting the library, that kind of thing, as much as we are just trying to sort of decrease our own TBR of books that we already own, which is really good for me and easy for me because I don't really check out library books, and I'm not going to buy any books until I get back from England, because I'm hoping to buy quite a bit over there. So I'm giving myself a little break so that I can save that money for that trip. And then in addition to that, I'm just reading from the Historathon Quarter 2, you know, section, history section, which is 500 to 1500 AD. And I've got a slew of books ready for that. My pile of possibilities is huge. I've already started for that one. I'm currently reading David Haworth's 1066 and loving it. I just, you know, okay, yes, it's England again, but it's a specific time period and it's not London. So I hope everybody's having a great day. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.